Hello, and welcome to Who Gets Ahead, the podcast series where we'll talk about what we are doing to increase social economic diversity at senior levels in financial and professional services across the UK and why we need to do it. I'm your host, Michael Barrington-Hibbert. We have a vision for equity of progression, where high performance is valued over fit and polish. Over the course of this series, we'll be joined by senior representatives from across financial and professional services who are all involved with the government-commissioned Social Economic Diversity Task Force led by the City of London Corporation. For more information on the task force, please visit www.cityoflondon.gov.uk/Who Gets Ahead, where you can sign up to the newsletter. Today on Who Gets Ahead, we're joined by Sandra Wallace, who is the co-chair of Workstream 1, which is industry consultation on the role of regulators, governments, and sector bodies in incentivising employer action. Sandra is a partner and joint managing director of the UK and Europe at DLA Piper. A very warm welcome to you, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Michael, and really nice to be talking to you on this podcast today.
Where I was very keen to start this discussion, Sandra, was really being able to talk a little bit about the beginning. I've seen and read some of your bio about growing up in Birmingham in a Caribbean household, but was very keen just to find out a little bit about the beginning and what really formed Sandra Wallace as a person and as a leader.
So I was brought up in a place called Lee Bank in Birmingham. I'm number 5 of 6. And really, if someone had said to me that I'd achieved half of what I've achieved when I was growing up, I would have really thought they'd drunk something very strong, because living and becoming a lawyer, getting into leadership of a law firm and taking on some of the roles I've done subsequently was just not something that was expected of me, considered at school, considered by my family. As much as they support and love me, it was just not something that was part of our world. And so it's why I feel so passionately about this agenda, because there's so many times in my life when I could have just gone a completely different way. I could have been stopped in my tracks, and life could have been very different. And how many more people must there be out there? People are saying there's a great skill shortage, etc. How many people actually could achieve what I've achieved if they had the right opportunities and somebody to help them along?
So I'm really keen, if you can, just to sort of walk our listeners through what were the expectations in your household, but also in the Midlands at the time for a black woman.
The expectations was that you left school pretty much and got a job. No one expected us to get any particular qualifications, my family included, the school included. I remember saying I wanted to go on to college and maybe work in an office. I remember at school, and practically being laughed at. I mean, literally, my school was a good school. It wasn't a bad school, but no, there was just no expectations of someone that was black coming from an Afro-Caribbean home. My mother was a cleaner. My father was a painter and decorator. My brothers and sisters before me had left to either go on a YTS or go into a factory work. And so there was just no expectation in terms of, uh, uh, you know, even at office work, these professional services career. If I'd have got a job in newsagents or cleaning in a hospital, that wouldn't have been seen as anything other than what was expected. And not to say those jobs aren't good, but there was just no encouragement to progress.
So tell me about going to college. Clearly, you have a characteristic and a resilience to, I'm not saying rebel against the system, but you've overcome many obstacles. So talk me through telling your parents at the age of 18 that you're going to college.
Yeah, I mean, if I just go back a little bit. So at school, I like cooking. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go into a hotel and get a job in a hotel and maybe get into management. There was a College of Food and Domestic Arts, it was called at the time, and I needed 2 A-levels. So I said I was going to go off and do 2 A-levels, but I got a job at Argos as a Saturday girl. So I was showing that I could actually I could actually earn money as a Saturday girl at Argos. Um, and so that was good. But to get those A-levels, I had to do what was then O-levels. And at school, they were saying, well, we don't do O-levels in X, Y, Z subjects. So basically, if you want to do them, you're going to have to teach yourself. So there's a couple of O-levels where I actually was the only person doing them, and I set those so I could get on to get into a college where I could do A-levels. And what I decided to do is, right, I thought, this isn't great. Nobody cares what happened in terms of my education here. A few teachers were really good, but I'm going to go to a college in the sort of the posh part of the city, Sutton Coldfield, Michael. And you'll know this if you're from Lee Bank. Sutton Coldfield was like, and so I
Yes,
thought,
that's
I'm
the
going to
bee's
go
knees.
there. Everybody's going to want to work, and I'm going to be great. And so of course I got to Sutton Coldfield, and not only was probably I was in a real minority in terms of black people at in Sutton Coldfield College at the time, that it was exactly as I thought. They were all quite posh, and so here was me with my sister's, you know, yellow jumper, and that had been handed down 3 times, and
Mm.
looking like, and then feeling, oh my God, what have I done? I've gone from the frying pan into the fire, and okay, they want to work here, but I feel so alone, and I don't fit
Yes.
in. And I just thought at that point, I came very close to just saying, my mum's right. I just need to just get a job and give this up.
But what was that moment then? So again, I can visualize that because I have aunties, uncles who've gone through a similar journey as yours. Walk me through that moment which stopped you from turning on your heels, wearing your sister's jumper, that yellow jumper. What stopped you in that moment from turning around? Because again, I think that fundamental foundation of resilience
Yeah,
it's so consistent throughout your career. So really keen for our listeners to understand
yeah. I mean,
what stopped you as an 18-year-old doing that.
I suppose, Michael, the reality is, I'd like to say it was sort of, believing I could be a lawyer, I could uh, do great things, or I was destined for great things. I think it was literally not having anything, having no money. Yeah, you were expected to give your parents money. So if even if it was a Saturday assistant, you gave your parents money to help out in the house. And I just thought, I can't do, I just, it would be nice not to be stood at a bus stop watching the buses just whiz by in the rain, because nobody has a car in the family, nobody, and you just stood there. And I just thought, there's got to be something else. There's just got to be something else for me. And I've got to just keep going, because I can't have a life where we're scrimping and saving. We were never, there was always food on the table. You ate fast, just in case anybody thought you were you were leaving anything behind. But there was always food on the table. But it was just never having, never going on holiday, never going in a car.
Mm,
You just think, I
mm,
just want a different life. So
mm.
that was what drove me, to be honest. It was just not wanting to be poor. I never, even then, when I was thinking about, okay, maybe I could go to do a degree, I never thought I'd be a lawyer. I just thought law sounds like a degree where you can get a good job afterwards. you know, if I'd have had my time again, I would have done English literature, any day of the week. But that's not a job you go back to your parents and say, that's not a degree you go back to your parents and say you're going to do. You're not going to be bringing money into the house for 3 years, and you're going to do an English literature degree, because they're like, and what's that going to get you? So,
Mm.
and that was what I was facing, and what kept me going at that time, Michael.
And so, and thank you so much for sharing, Sandra, because what this is doing for our listeners is really enabling them to understand the pillars of your youth, of resilience, perseverance, and how this has shaped you in terms of your career path. So I'm really keen now, Sandra, to move and fast forward um, after university and obtaining an incredible degree at the University of Wolverhampton, where you studied law, and then Chester College of Law. Talk to me about your first day at DLA Piper. So I'm hoping at that stage you weren't borrowing a yellow jumper
Yes,
as you walked in, but you may have done. So talk to me about that experience of feeling as an outsider, the nerves walking through into the office in Birmingham after the years of sacrifice, seeing some of your friends
Mm.
who are even working. I've worked at Argos, by the way, so
Yes.
that's why it's a shame. It's a shame that this is an audio, because I'm sat here thinking I used to love the
Oh,
catalogs. We used to,
exactly.
go in, So again, there's lots of intersectionalities there. But the sacrifice that you had to make, where your friends were going out, they were going out on a Saturday night, they were earning money, and you were, dedicated to your craft. So tell me about that moment of how you felt walking into the office for the first time.
Do you know what? I had no trepidation because I didn't know what to expect. I
Interesting.
just thought,
Okay.
this is amazing. I've done it. I've got a job at a law firm. And though, of course, you don't know if they're going to keep you on for 2 years, you just think, no one can take this away from me. I have. I have pushed on and gone through various things and other milestones that where I might have turned back, and I just thought, this is amazing. I've made it, and I never for one moment thought, actually, I'm going to have to become be a different person, or you know perhaps there'll be different expectations on me. I just thought, I've made it. I've done the degree. I've done the little school. I've passed my, the exams. I'm a lawyer. I'm on the path to being a lawyer. And to be fair, there was a lot of there wasn't much trepidation for a long time. Um, once I started, because I felt like I fitted in. I think the firm was very diverse, very inclusive, very down to earth, and I just felt, yeah, I've made it. And then you start to think, actually, I've got to pass these 2 years. I've got to get a job at the end of it. Then you start to look around and get a bit more competitive and think, gosh, I maybe don't speak all the lingo, or I don't have all the experiences, or I don't have the connections. And suddenly you're thinking, right, I've got to get this purely on the skill at doing the job, because that no one's thinking, she's a typical lawyer. I don't know if you know what I mean by that. I mean, people spoke the language. They'd been to Val d'Isere. They knew, they played, golf, and they did things that I just didn't have any experience of. And I suddenly then started to panic as the 2 years were coming up, thinking, I wonder if I actually fit in. I've just been kidding myself, um, uh, about from a very naive start, I suppose.
Sandra, can I just add to that, because we had the opportunity to speak with Tracy Gerard, who is the CEO of AXA Health, who was born in Blackpool, didn't go to university at a young age, and she spoke about this very thing around being on the peripheral, of not going to skiing, not being involved in those conversations. So tell me, how did you overcome that? Did you just throw yourself into that dialogue, or how did you circumnavigate that and enable yourself to be an authentic leader in that regard?
Um, you hide a bit of yourself in the reality.
Mm,
You
okay.
don't, the conversation where you talk about your background, that just not would never have happened in those early days. So if people, uh, assume made assumptions about your background and your education and so on, and you didn't disabuse them. I speak like this, I don't speak like Michael. You and I probably talk to our parents when we were at home. I threw myself into the social event. So I was a person that people thought, oh, she's so sociable. She gets involved in so many things. I did things at law centres locally, and so I made myself sort of indispensable, I suppose, as well as working very, very hard at being an employment lawyer and getting on very, very well with clients. So just made myself feel like I was part of the furniture and hoped that people couldn't see through it. And for a long time, you do spend your time thinking people are going to suss me out soon. People are going to work out that I'm a bit of a fraud here. Um, and it takes a long time to get over that and not because anyone's doing anything or saying anything particularly, just from your own background and insecurities and expectations of what
Thank you.
the environment is.
And Sandra, before we transition and start talking about your involvement in the task force, when did you find that voice to talk about working at Argos
Mm,
on a Saturday,
yeah.
wearing the yellow jumper as a hand-me-down, having to so all the things that you're saying to me, I'm sat here because I've lived what you've lived, and even when you spoke about dinner time and eating really quickly, I had a big older brother and we were fighting for seconds. So I absolutely understand that. But I never shared that part of me only until the last few years.
Mm.
So when did you find that voice to actually say, look, do you know what, Sandra, you're doing a pretty darn good job here. You need to start telling people who you really are. So when was that moment? How long ago was
Do you
it?
know what? It wasn't as early as I'd have liked it to have been. The reality was, I felt that I didn't join any, you know, black lawyer networks or women networks, or, I just thought, I've made it and I don't need to, affiliate myself with these things. It's all about working hard. And, I'm ashamed to say, I just thought I didn't want it to seem like I was trying to trade on my being a woman or being black, or just that I just thought I was a successful lawyer and people should take me as they find me. And as you get, the reality was, as I got more senior and didn't see people like me coming through, I thought, Sandra, what are you doing? You are really getting that ladder and dragging it up behind yourself, because you're not speaking and you're not doing anything. You're not taking ownership for the fact that if you're in leadership and you're not talking about this and trying to help other people, then who's going to be doing it? And so it's probably when I started to manage the UK business. Um, so I'd been a partner for quite a few years and just doing my thing and growing my practice, and that I thought, Sandra, you've got to start making a difference, because otherwise everyone's just going to carry on looking like you always assume they would to be a lawyer. And when I thought about it, I thought, what is it that sort of that I found the most difficult to get to where I was? And whilst I did experience racism, and whilst I've had 3 children, and it's been tough working part-time, and things taking a little bit longer, the thing that has really held me back the most has been my background, and not feeling that I fitted in, and the obstacles I faced. And that's when I started to look more closely at social mobility and what I could do on this agenda, and it starts small. I would just tell my story, and get involved in the recruitment processes we had at the firm, etc., and then you build up to, okay, I'm going to be an advocate for this. I'm going to have a special team at DLA Piper that looks at this, and so on. So it started slowly, and probably slower than I would have liked.
No, and I understand that in many respects, and I think a number of our listeners will do as well. It's similar to Tracy Gerard, as I mentioned. It's similar to a number of senior executives in the workforce. That the challenge is that within a number of head offices, financial professional services firm, they encourage or have encouraged a homogeneous approach of the universities and the ski trips and things of that nature. So that additional context is really helpful. So we've provided our listeners with a really excellent foundation of you, your career, and your drivers. So as the co-chair of this task force, you're leading a work stream looking at the role of regulators, sector bodies, and government in incentivizing employer action. Can you tell us what you're hearing so far, Sandra?
What I'm hearing is really encouraging. There are so many organisations in the financial services sector that are saying, do you know what? We are just touching the surface of this agenda. We want to know more. We want to do more. We see the hidden biases in the way our organisations are run and how we drive, how we progress, and we want to do something about it. But I'm also hearing, we don't have a baseline, level of information such that we know the scale of the problem, or how we then go about to address it. So there's a willingness, but there's also a clear concern that employers don't really know what their workforce typically looks like, and therefore how they can drive change. So there's a lot of talk about what they have to do to get on the journey, but there's a real willingness to get on that journey.
And is it? And thank you for the clarity there. Is it a case of the willingness is there, but it's just a case of how to get there? So, for example, with gender, over the last 10 years, it's been very intentional. Still not where it needs to be. Let's be very clear. We're still at the embryonic stages of race. Ever since the murder of George Floyd, organisations have come out with missions of intent. But again, with social economic diversity, it's still a new phenomena. So is it just a case of the willingness is there, Sandra? It's just more of a case of how these organisations can get on the journey.
Yeah, I think it is, because I think it's less obvious. So understanding whether someone's background, understanding the journey that they took is not something that's necessarily obvious. So how do they role model and champion people in their organisations that have progressed, such that other people that have been on similar journeys are prepared to speak up and talk about their experience and say what's still holding them back? Do they even know whether they've got a socioeconomically diverse workforce? And because they might have more than they anticipate, and it might not be an issue for them. But the reality is, it's likely to be that if they started tracking this data collection on socioeconomic diversity, that we know there's a prevalence of people that come from a more privileged backgrounds at more senior levels, and that people from lower socioeconomic diversity backgrounds are still at the early rung of their professions, if they're in there at all. So they need to understand their workforce, and there's a lot of work going on to understand how they can capture that. But they're also thinking, well, how can we ensure that people understand that it's a safe place? How can we showcase the fact that this is an area we are determined to improve? And how can we do that in the way that's sensitive to the other um, um, diversity agenda, so it's people still feel included? Because what the worst thing we could have is a situation where anybody thinks this is the next big new shiny area to concentrate on, at the exclusion of so many other areas where we've still got a long way to go.
Why would someone who is 3 or 4 years into their career be incentivized to actually put their hand or head above the parapet to actually say, look, this is who I am? Because you want to be recognized as a damn good lawyer, which you are. And you didn't want to be centralized as I'm a black woman from a working class background. And it wasn't woe tide me, but there was an element in your head that you thought there would be some pity. So, what would you say to Sandra Wallace as a solicitor 3 or 4 years into her career? Would you encourage yourself to put your head up and actually show up and share a little bit more of who you are?
Yeah, I would. And I know it sounds odd, because you think, well, why does that make a difference to the day job? It makes a difference because you bring a different perspective. You have a completely different you might have a completely different mindset that could enhance your organization. And if you don't bring your whole self to work, if you think there's elements of yourself that you need to hold back or not share, it means that you're on your guard, and you're a bit guarded in the way you might be working, and that might translate itself in the way you deliver your legal services, or the way you interact in a team meeting, because you're always thinking, there's a bit of me that I don't really want people to understand, or I don't want to seem foolish because I don't understand some aspect of what someone's talking about in a meeting. A lot of people say to me that are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds at junior levels that I mentor, they say, oh, I was in this team meeting, but I didn't say anything because they were talking about, some a sporting event or some whatever it might be, and I just didn't know really what they were talking about, so I didn't say anything. And then I go to that team, and the partner says, and I say, oh, what do you think of the X? They're a bit quiet, and a bit. I wish that, not they don't have much to say for themselves. So suddenly your background is showing up in the workplace in a way that means it's translating and could actually be defining you to others, all because you're frightened to be who you really are. So whilst it might not feel like it impacts, while it might not feel like this is something you need to overshare, I'm not asking you to go around telling every aspect of your story, but you really need to think about the fact that, where is it impacting? Where is it inhibiting me? And could that be translating to others in a way that I'm not expecting?
And
So
that's really helpful
yeah.
context. And again, unfortunately, the listeners, we're not on camera to one another, so that's why sometimes I may overtalk, so I can't see when Sandra's finishing. But again, lots of that is super relevant, and even in my career, I didn't share. I worked for one of the world's most prestigious executive search firm at the start of my career, and I was so fixated about assimilated into the organization that I didn't come across authentic. I didn't share going to Alberton, which is in North London, to see my grandparents at the weekend and have rice and peas and chicken and the various other components of my life. I just didn't share. So as a consequence, my colleagues were suspicious of me because I just didn't. I went to a state school. I left with a very handful of GCSEs. I just didn't fit into any particular group. And it was only after I received some coaching and some great insight that I started to talk more about my background. And as a consequence, I was invited out to team events. I was invited out to personal engagements with my colleagues because, one, there was admiration in terms of what I've achieved in my career, but also I was being more transparent. So that for me is super helpful.
And it's
Now
exactly
I'm
the
just
point,
mindful of
Michael. It's
time.
exactly the point.
Yeah.
It's a really good illustration.
So what are your hopes and aspirations for the work the task force is undertaking, Sandra?
So my hope is that, first of all, we'll raise awareness in this area much more than we ever have. My feeling is that there is still a lot of people out there the same. I'm not really sure what this social mobility and this agenda is about. So I think awareness raising is critical. I think that if some of the most recognized and the most strategic and most well-regarded businesses are taking this journey seriously and coming out and making bold statements about their commitment to improving progression in their workplaces, that this will really drive change in other organizations. So I'm hoping that we get to that. I'm also hoping that we make sure that people understand that there's a long way to go, that everybody has a part to play. It's not just business, it's government, it's education, and that together we'll start to see greater collaboration across the sectors in order to drive change.
One more question for me, and I can spend the next hour talking to you, but I'm mindful that you've got a big meeting to go to next. But leveling up is really a common phrase. Can you share your thoughts, and you've touched on this throughout the podcast, on how the UK can best address inequalities within organisations and places, as well as between places? And I would like you to caveat that with, I've asked you to talk to the Sharon before she became a partner at the firm. I'm really keen for you to maybe share a message to employers as well around the importance of embracing this initiative and getting behind it?
For me, the levelling up agenda is key. We should focus on people as much as place. So it's not all about infrastructure and transport links and so on, but it's about the skills that we can bring to a community. It's about internships. It's about apprenticeships. It's not all about becoming a lawyer or a and so on. It's about giving people the opportunity to progress in the way that suits them, but making sure they have that opportunity. So for me, it's about leveling the playing field so people can reach their potential. And that is just as important as where you end up or what job you end up in. It's about people feeling, you know what, I got that opportunity and I might not have gone for it. I might decided I wanted to do something else, but there was no barriers in my place. And I think that is the most critical thing for me.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and thank you to the mighty Sandra for being with us today. Join us next time where Task Force members Yasmin Chanwala and John Collins will discuss how organisations can harvest the values of the Task Force and make a difference. For more information on the Social Economic Diversity Task Force, please type the City of London Who Gets Ahead into your search bar to find out our webpage and sign up to our newsletter to stay up to date. On social media, please visit City of London Corporation on LinkedIn. On Twitter, it's City of London. And on YouTube, The Global City. Who Gets Ahead is produced by trading and education firm OSTC. A special thank you for your kind support on this series. Find out more at OSTC on Twitter and OSTC Ltd on LinkedIn.